Are the Carolina Panthers set for a breakout led by Bryce Young's comeback? We'll discuss that and the rest of the NFC South on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready, Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome in to the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, joined today by Locked On NFL expert, the brain, Luke Braun. On today's episode, we're going to take a look at the NFC South teams as we head into the heart of the offseason. We'll discuss why the New Orleans Saints have an identity crisis, discuss why I think the top two teams in the division may take a step back this year. But we'll start with the Carolina Panthers and Bryce Young, who also made the biggest move in the NFL on Tuesday, bringing back Andy Dalton. Before we dive into it, though, do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen and for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Again, we start with the Panthers here. Bryce Young and him kind of getting back on track at the back end of the season was a great thing for the Panthers as they set their course into 2025, knowing who they're going to have at quarterback. They did just re-sign Andy Dalton as well to a 2-year deal. So they're kind of set at the quarterback position going forward. What they do from here, from where they come from, my guy, Julian Council from Locked On Panthers, talked about that.
It was all so much better. It was competent around Bryce, and so competent that Bryce Young, once he decided to also be competent, from weeks 9 to the end of the season, he was the 6th highest graded player at quarterback in the NFL, only behind Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, and Baker Mayfield. So to get top 6, top 10 quarterback play out of Bryce in the second half of the season, that now has answered the biggest question heading into 2024 of what do you have in Bryce Young? Well, what you have in Bryce Young is your starter in 2025, and potentially if things keep trending the way they've gone over the last 9-10 weeks of the season, you have your franchise quarterback finally here in Carolina after years of wandering around the wilderness and trying guys for 1 year, then letting them go after that season to be your starting quarterback. It looks like Bryce Young will be that guy. So last year was all about helping Bryce Young. This year, as far as the offense go, it should be about maximizing what you now have in Bryce Young.
I'm on board with that. I could see the Carolina Panthers being this year's Arizona Cardinals, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that's perfect. Andy Dalton must be very good for Bryce Young. That's, I guess, was my first reaction to that news.
Right.
And that is like the biggest question of the whole NFC South. Maybe the whole NFC is how much of a participant are the Panthers going to be? Mm-hmm. And bringing back Andy Dalton doesn't tell me much about that, but obviously it was Bryce Young's kind of halfway breakout back of the season. Was that something worth paying attention to, or did he just get hot for a few weeks and then it's going to fall back into what it was before? But you know, a young quarterback developing a little bit in his second year is certainly not unheard of.
No. And I think, see, the way that I view it is not so much that he could drop back. To me, it was a big deal because we had never even seen it before. We had not seen it at the NFL level. So at that point in time, it was like, can we believe in this guy at all? People were just completely jumping overboard on the Bryce Young boat, I'll say. But the fact that he was even able to play at that level, I think that tells you something. And for the Panthers, it provided so much clarity for them to go into I think if he didn't have that moment in the sun, they would be discussing quarterback options this offseason. They are decidedly not doing that. And I think that's
a bad year to be doing that.
Exactly. That sort of clarity gives the Panthers a great path forward. I think they really got to add some help on defense. J.C. Horn is a good player. They have some young players on that side of the ball, but the defense has to take a step forward. And they bring back defensive coordinator Irjo Evero. Like, was that the right decision? I don't know. I feel like they really need to take a step on that side of the ball. And of course, you can add to Bryce Young, but it's the defensive side of the ball, even though Bryce Young's the more poppy thing to talk about, that I think would define the Panthers season this year.
So let's assume, just for the sake of argument, that Bryce Young is going to continue to be the future of the Panthers and that it's not going to fall away, that this is real and Bryce Young's your guy and he's the future. Mm-hmm. They have some future issues with just some guys that are old, and Andy Dalton's one of them. Okay, 2-year deal on that, but backup quarterback, not the most pressing thing, not going to be the most expensive thing, but something you got to deal with. Adam Thielen, Shaq Thompson. I mean, these
Thompson
are
could be good, and their defense gets even worse.
And so these are pieces you're going to have to replace, not to mention finding places to improve on the roster that's already in place. The Panthers have a lot of work to do. But I like your idea that they could be the Cardinals, where they're a feisty team, that a hard out, that can give a run to some contender that needs this win to stay in position for the 1 seed. And, that can screw somebody's day up. But I do think that they still, I mean, there's a lot of work to do here. But it was real dark when it didn't look like Bryce Young was going to work out at all. And that they were going to have to go back into the QB market, and we'd be talking about Cam Ward as a Panther, and what if he and I mean, that gets you to dark places. That gets you to like 2010s Browns places. So they've got something to build on, and that's good news for the Panthers. But like, they ain't going to be favored for the division. We got a ways to go for that.
Yeah, I agree there. I would just say, when we start to every year in the NFL, there are teams that maybe do a little bit more than people expect. It's every year. The NFL is known for worst to first. If I had to pick a team in this division that didn't win the division last year that I think could make a big step, I would probably go with the Panthers. Like, they just need a couple things to fall into place. There's some questions on the O-line too, and I think having a fortified wall on the O-line and the O-line playing decent at times last year really helped Bryce Young. But is Ekonwu a guy who you're going to move forward with long-term? Taylor Moton, I believe, is a free agent. Austin Corbett was playing center, but that's a question mark going forward. They definitely do need a lot of help, but if Canales can get this team playing the way that they played last year with better talent and Bryce Young continuing to improve, I could see them being feisty, knocking off some teams, playing spoiler. Again, the Cardinals feel like a very good comparison, but they could maybe even be better than that, because I know that NFC West wasn't, a ton to write home about last year, but the NFC South is no, gauntlet by any means. So the Panthers could be one of those teams that maybe they're, in the wild card hunt. Maybe they do. I know it's not exactly the same, but maybe they pull a Denver Broncos on us.
I don't know if I'm willing to quite go that far. But if we're going to have this conversation, we should also mention Xavier Legette and Jalen Coker, who had good years too.
Yes.
But okay, so you get a step forward out of those guys. You get a step forward out of Bryce Young. You get a step forward from someone young on defense. Like, hey man, if 6 different things happen, they could sneak into the wild card. Yes. It's like where we're at. Let me ask you this. If the Panthers are 500 in 2025, are the Panthers happy with that? If they're 8-9, miss the playoffs, pick 14th, are they happy with that? Or do they have to have more growth to feel okay about the direction of the team?
I think the answer is yes. My immediate answer is yes. They're very happy with that. I think that would be a huge improvement. But reality is, it all depends on how Bryce Young looks. Because if they're back in the gutter at quarterback again, let's say he gets hurt or he plays terrible and Andy Dalton comes back in and leads you to 5 of those 8 wins. You know what I mean?
1-5 with Bryce Young, and then Andy Dalton
So my
comes in
answer
and
is
makes
yes. But also
conditionally.
We'll see. We'll see about that with the asterisks on it. But with that being said, talking about we'll see, some big questions with the 2 top teams in the NFC South. I think the Buccaneers might take a step back here. A little bit of a hot take for you. It's Locked On NFL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by TurboTax from Intuit. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back on your taxes a little bit more. You just keep wondering and waiting and worrying. But now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return. while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now, this is taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. All right, Luke, let's continue today's edition of Locked On NFL, taking a look at the NFC South. We got some topical news in the NFC South with Andy Dalton signing a 2-year deal with the Carolina Panthers to come back and support Bryce Young, which is obviously the crux of their season. But the two top teams in the division I find very interesting as well. And we'll start with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And to keep it topical, right now we are in the franchise tag transition tag window, and some considered Chris Godwin an option to maybe get the franchise tag, but sounds like, according to my guy James Yarko from Locked On Bucks, that is not going to happen as he goes over some recent reports.
So I have been extremely vocal about my belief that Chris Godwin returns to the Buccaneers next season and beyond, and how it makes a ton of sense for both sides from an on-field standpoint as well as off the field from a business aspect. But one of the other things that I have mentioned in the past is that I would not have been surprised to see the Buccaneers use their franchise tag on him just to ensure they get the exclusive negotiating rights like they did with Antoine Winfield Jr. last year, like they did with Chris Godwin once before. However, that will not be happening. That is according to ESPN's Jenna Lane. So ESPN dropped an article about every team's possible use of the franchise tag. And for the Bucs, Lane said, quote, while sources told ESPN that the Bucs very much want receiver Chris Godwin back and will do what it takes to make this happen, it won't be by using the franchise tag.
So I agree with the decision to not use the franchise tag on Chris Godwin. I think coming off injury and at his age, that wouldn't be the wise thing to do. And Jalen McMillan, the rookie out of Washington, was excellent for the Buccaneers down the back half of the stretch of the season. The Bucs are an interesting team to me because they have some good players. They have some good weapons on offense, some young players. I trust Baker Mayfield to be a competent quarterback, even though he's a little bit risky at times. But I don't trust Todd Bowles, and I don't think the Buccaneers trust Todd Bowles either. And I think that the reason that the Bucs were special last year is because of the offense. And I think if you take Liam Cohen out of that situation, I think that was part of the reason that the Buccaneers were so mad that the Jacksonville situation played out the way that it did, and why they put the clause in, hey, we'll offer you this, but you can't talk to Jacksonville. Because I think the Buccaneers wanted to do one more year with Todd Bowles, and then they wanted to give that job to Liam Cohen. So not only did they lose their offensive coordinator, but they may have lost their long-term head coach to pair with Baker Mayfield and get the best out of him. I feel like without the best version of the Buccaneers offense, which I'm not certain I'm going to get, and the unreliability of Todd Bowles and their defense, I can't go with Tampa Bay this year. Maybe not last, because we'll talk about the worst team at the end of the show. But I think Tampa Bay takes a step back this year. I think they're like third in the division.
I'm in completely the opposite direction on this. I'm just looking at the state of the Buccaneers right now. They have kept their band together now for 5 years, and all they do is win the division. And it doesn't seem like a lot is going to change, assuming James is right about Chris Godwin coming back. That would be a big one. But I think the Bucs, to me, are this great example of the difference between complete and elite. I don't know who on the Buccaneers is the best guy in the world at their job. Tristan Wirfs, maybe Vita Vea.
Yes.
There's a couple of elite players for you. But a lot of their strength comes from Bucky Irving being good enough, Kate Otten being good enough, right?
Yes.
And Jalen McMillan being good enough when guys got hurt. Baker Mayfield being good enough. And that always gets them in the dance, and, you know, it tends to, it's been topping out for them, and maybe they do need that. They need that like crazy good first round draft pick that, you know, that the guy they thought like Joe Tryon-Shoyinka was going to be.
Yes.
But if you look at, like, I don't know what the roster weakness is that sinks them. Their O-line's pretty good. Like Tristan Wirfs, I like Cody Mauch. I like Ben Bredson. Okay. Like those guys are okay to me. The secondary, Antoine Winfield, I like him a lot. Jamel Dean, very proven. Like, the D-line, you've got Kalijah Cansey and Vita Vea on the inside that gave teams fits all year long. I don't see the problem with the Bucs that sinks them. And at a certain point, the lack of weaknesses becomes your strength. And teams go in with a really hard problem of how do I attack the Bucs? Becomes hard. And I think when you have the elite, you can attack that by saying, well, our really elite guy is just going to do his thing against you. But not everybody has that.
I understand that, but I think a lot of their success is built on some older players. You have a guy like Mike Evans, and then you bring Chris Godwin back. And then on the defensive side of the ball, what's the status of Levante David? You know, I'm just not overwhelmed by their roster. And I feel like if they don't have a coaching advantage, that they're just going to be average. I see 7-10, 8-9. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that we get a 9-8 or a 10-7. But I just think with the step back in coaching on the offensive side of the ball, and if some of their older players actually start to show that age, which has to happen eventually, then it could be just not good enough to be the team that we, would expect them to be, or that our guys over at FanDuel would have them be. But do want to move to the Atlanta Falcons. I'm sorry. I know we got Bucs takes. Yeah. Listen.
Much rather talk about the Buccaneers.
Tell me your last thought on the Bucs. I'll give you that.
My last thought on the Bucs is that I have learned to trust Baker Mayfield. The guy that he was in Cleveland, the guy that he was for his random stint in Carolina was a long time ago. He has figured this out with the Bucs. He's got his chemistry with all these guys. And a team that was very injured last year is coming back, and you just hope they're a little healthier this time.
Good coaching, good Baker Mayfield. Bad coaching, not as good Baker Mayfield. So that Dave Canales, Liam Cohen, Kevin Stefanski, all head coach level offensive coordinators. If he's not getting head coach level offensive coordinator, then we'll see. We'll just see anyway. So with that being said, though, do want to talk Atlanta Falcons quickly. I think the Falcons are in a tough spot. They don't have a lot to play with in the offseason. And while the talent is good on offense, they need to be better on defense. I don't know how they get there. My guy, Aaron Freeman, as usual, very skeptical of the Falcons from Locked On Falcons.
I don't expect the Falcons to make any blockbuster deals in free agency. We'll see if they start cutting people like Grady Jarrett and Caleb McGarry or whatever. That will change the math. But given that I'm not expecting those guys to get cut, I'm not expecting the Falcons to make any big blockbuster deals at this point. Like, if I was to guess, the most likely big contract that the Falcons would hand out is maybe to Jamie Sherwood, the linebacker from the Jets. That number could be north of $10 million. I've seen some projections that think it's going to be like $7 or $8 million, but I think we'll probably get north of $10 million there on that one. But that's about it at this stage. But we'll see as we get closer to free agency. But you're asking me about the offensive floor and ceiling. It's hard to make these projections until the Falcons make moves in the offseason. But I would say their ceiling is probably like the 7th best offense in the league. Their floor is probably the 20th best offense in the league. And sort of if you split the difference, that eye level would be about 14th. And the 7th best offense, according to DVOA last year, was Tampa Bay. The 20th was the Colts, and the 14th was the Falcons last year. So if they split the difference, they'll be basically the same level of offense that they were a year ago.
My big problem here is, if the offense probably is about what it was last year at times, and you're not making any big moves on defense, where does that leave the Falcons if that wasn't good enough to make it into the playoffs last year? My concern here is that they don't understand the window they're in. I think with Michael Penix on the rookie contract, and then the young players that they have on the offensive side of the ball, they are a team that can make win now moves and go out and really attack their weaknesses to try to get better. Like Myles Garrett, I think would be a good move for the Atlanta Falcons. I guess I see them as a team that needs to kind of push all in and try to do it now, not a team that needs to be patient and conservative and all that. And it sounds like, from Aaron's perspective at least, the Falcons are going to be that aggressive.
I remember these Kirk Cousins off seasons. I mean, the whole hope is pinned on Michael Penix will produce better quarterback play, more consistent quarterback play than Kirk Cousins did, because it still kind of sounds like that's not going, that that situation's not going great.
Well, I think even if they're
like-
even, you go with Penix because he's younger and he's cheaper.
for sure.
So I don't know that I
for
would
the
even say it
Falcons
would
to
be way
like be
better.
something. Especially like for your take that like the Bucs need to fall to third and the Falcons need to usurp them for that. Like for that to happen, Penix needs to be pretty significantly better, and the Falcons feel like maybe they're just banking on that. But
well, they should. They took him in the first round. I mean,
yeah.
If not, you're wrong.
Second year, 8th overall. Now it's time for you to do that. Good for you. But it does kind of feel like the Falcons are just sort of, I don't know. I hate saying stuck in neutral because that's just the Kirk Cousins of it all. The second he leaves, they won't feel stuck in neutral anymore. They've got a rookie quarterback. He's growing. But definitely stagnation is not good enough. That can't be the standard. If that's the standard, we got a problem. I doubt it is, but that
Penix just got rid of Arthur Smith. You got rid of Arthur Smith to avoid that. You go out and trade for Matthew Judon and you go get Justin Simmons last year. It's like clearly they see themselves as a win now team. So if they don't do anything on either side of the ball that can make a major impact, I'm just like confused about what their approach is and what their vision is. But
we were one game out of the NFC South win, so let's just hope our rookie's a little better and that'll be enough. Like, is that the vibe?
In-house development will take us to where we need to be. I mean, I guess I could understand that look, but I just don't know if that's enough. I guess I have my questions.
Least exciting teams in the league.
Yeah, they're kind of just there. But with that being said, talk about not knowing what the path forward is. I think the New Orleans Saints are in an identity crisis, and what they do at quarterback going forward, I think is going to tell us what they think they are. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off and you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting, whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or I'm picking a player to hit a clutch three. I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Luke, so we mercilessly head to the New Orleans Saints. Before we break it down, though, do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen each and every day. Make sure you check out the afternoon edition of Locked On NFL with Tony Wiggins in the barbershop. But the biggest question for the Saints this offseason is certainly what they're going to do at quarterback. And there's a lot of different routes that they can go. But my guy, Ross Jackson, the mastermind from Locked On Saints, went with what I think might be the most peculiar route of them all.
Giving Spencer Rattler a shot in 2025 makes sense, but he wouldn't be the only one in the conversation. So let me start off with why I think Spencer Rattler would deserve the shot. Look, he started, 6 games last year. All 6 of those games were losses. And, we can do the injury thing and say that he never had Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, Alvin Kamara, all healthy, all in one game and all those other things. Didn't have Eric McCoy for certain games and stuff like that. But I'm going to leave that to the side because if we're not going to make injury excuses for one quarterback, we shouldn't make injury excuses for another quarterback. And remember, my my understanding of the idea of moving on from Derek Carr doesn't really have anything to do with Derek Carr's performance, right? It doesn't really have anything to do with how he is as a quarterback, how he performed as a quarterback. It's just, where do you want to invest your time? If I'm a head coach, I want to invest my time on the guys that can be my future, not the guy that I'm relying on the exceptions of the world to prove could be my future. And so with that being the case, I would say that if the Saints do move on from Derek Carr, I would be looking to give Spencer Rattler a shot to lead the way.
Look, all due respect to my guy, Ross. As I told you, Luke, I think that Ross is so good that he knows what the right thing to do for the team is. And the Saints need to take their medicine And I would love a year of Spencer Rattler for the Saints. I would love that.
But
they're not going to win very many.
It would be bad.
Because it would be bad.
Yeah, that's
and
your
would
point.
set them up
I think you're making a different argument.
Right. And so, but if we're making the argument that Spencer Rattler, if you're Kellen Moore and you want to win games right away, like, I guess it's an identity crisis in my mind, because if the Saints go with Spencer Rattler, I would hope that that would mean that they're accepting their plight, their cap situation. They know that they kind of need to reset things. And they have told Kellen Moore, you have a vote of confidence from us. We accept that we're going to need some patience to build this thing back. If that's what they're doing, then I agree 100%. But I doubt that's what they're doing. New Orleans has never been an organization that's just okay with being bad. They don't, whether right, wrong, or
not for a
realistic
while.
or not.
Not since the
You know
90s when they were the Aints, but
right. It's in modern recent history. So, like, if they think that they're going to be competitive and they just paid Alvin Kamara an extension and they're going to bring back guys and they're not trying to cut weight and they think that that's all going to happen led by Spencer Rattler, then there is like a level of craziness in New Orleans that I didn't realize was happening.
Yeah, I've got so many issues with what everyone's talking about here, okay? First off, Spencer Rattler is not an NFL player. We saw that at South Carolina. We saw that in New Orleans. Give it up. It's over. It's like, hey, what if Chase Daniel went in? And what if, I don't know. Hope all you want, but I think we've seen enough. And if you want to come fight me on that, I got a Patreon video for you. But the other thing is, when you're a new head coach, there are a few like universal things about the experience of being a new head coach. And one of those universal things is that you want your guy at quarterback. So the second round pick, or was it a third? Late third?
Anyway,
it was like a while. Yeah. The mid-round pick.
Day 2. Yeah.
That you did not have anything to do with selecting because you were in Philadelphia at the time, putting together a Super Bowl team.
It was third.
That sucks. Is not going to be anything that you want to tie any of your capital to. And here's the thing about being a head coach. Time is not infinite. You can't just blow a year. You can't afford to just say, we'll blow a year. This is maybe the 1 year you're going to have the most patience for. But if you do the thing that you're saying, Tyler, and say, well, we're going to suck. Let's just suck with Spencer Rattler and reset our cap. You are spending all the political capital that you have. You are going to enter year 2 on the hot seat. Good luck.
Yes.
You want to get a rookie going with year 2 on the hot seat?
Brian
I can't be on the hot seat
style.
if I'm Kellen Moore.
Yep.
I can't be on the hot seat with that. There is a mandate in the NFL to be serious. You must be serious in the NFL. You owe that to your fans. Your owner is going to hold that to you because your shareholders are going to hold that to you. Your players, your locker room.
That's my question. What's he selling?
That's a great question.
If he's selling patience, then sure. But if you're selling wins and you go with Rattler, then you deserve what happens to you.
Exactly. I don't know what you're selling if you go with Spencer Rattler, other than, hey, expect nothing of me real quick. Can you expect nothing of me for a while? That's not an NFL attitude.
Right. And I do want to, I'm sorry, Ross. I'll discuss these things with you as well. I'm not taking shots at Ross here, but me and Ross disagreed on something else with the press conference with Kellen Moore. He said, quote, Derek's a tremendous quarterback in this league. He's a starter in this league. He's a premier player in this league. Really excited to team up with him and go through the process. And Ross was like, yeah, but what's the process? You know, the process could be cutting Derek Carr. You know what I mean? Like
contract.
working
the
with
contract
his team
process.
But if you say he's a starter in this league, he's a premier player in this league, and then you're selling wins to the owner, and then you get rid of Derek Carr and go with Spencer Rattler, like, I don't know. It just doesn't add up. The math ain't mathing on all of that to me. So what are they really doing in New Orleans? What is their real vision going forward? What's their level of patience? I think we're going to learn that based on what they do at quarterback, because I have a hard time seeing them going with Spencer Rattler and saying that that's the best path to maximizing wins.
So it's interesting. I just looked at his contract. And so what if your idea for the Saints is, hey, we got to just kind of like take a year on the chin so that we can reset things and move forward, right? I actually think sticking with Derek Carr might be the best way to do that because of the way his contract is structured.
Right.
If you cut him right now, it's all dead cap. You'd have to post-June it, which is fine. You can post-June it. But the numbers if you post-June it and the numbers if you just wait to cut him till next year are very similar. So the difference between cutting him now and cutting him next year, money-wise, doesn't save you all that much. And guess what?
Nope.
It keeps you at least serious. You're not going to be the best team in the league. You're not going to be the best team in the South. I'm probably picking you to be 4th in the South. But you can at least look at that and say, hey, look, we're not wasting everyone's time. And we're going to give this one more year to try to work out with an offensive, wunderkind that we really feel good about, because Dennis Allen was not that. And you can at least go show up to the PowerPoint with Mickey Loomis and be like, this is what we think is going to happen. And you can at least make some kind of cogent argument about, well, we're going to do better scheming on offense. We're going to go back to the Sean Payton era of being an offensive minded team. And Derek Carr did this and that well, and we can make that argument. And guess what? When it flames out for all of 2025, you can cut him in 2026, and it's so much nicer to do that. And then the cap gets super reset. It's a better year to need a quarterback next year. And Kellen Moore can handpick his guy. And as long as you didn't go 2-15, you're not gonna work through everybody's patience, right? Win 6 or 7, and everybody's gonna go, mediocre, but we're gonna move on from this. Versus if you go with Spencer Rattler, and you just eat a year of that, you are the Raiders this year. Do you want to be the Raiders?
No.
Nobody wants to be the Raiders.
No, nobody does. Yeah, I'm with you there. It'd be hard to sell to the fans. We're trying to win games and Spencer Rattler at the same time, and when the benefit of doing that and going that route isn't really that immense, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But with that being said, that is going to do it for today's edition of Locked On NFL. I am your host, the Madman Tyler Rowland, for my co-host, the Brain, Luke Braun. Thanks for tuning in, and stay safe out there.